demos. Concepts. We're going service full. What does this mean? This means that, more and more, a modern application first is containerized. It runs in Kubernetes and it's managed via CI/CD. Okay, that's the new modern application that we've seen, arrive when the container revolution took place, and then more and more enterprises started putting CI/CD in place with very elaborate application lifecycle systems. So we have more and more of this. The enterprises are more familiar with this. The CI/CD systems are in place, generating containers. They're stored in repository with manifests. They're being signed for good auditing, good security, hygiene, and so on. And then those applications that are containerized, or services that are containerized, they're then deployed in a platform like Kubernetes, right? So the picture that you see here, it's something I totally stole from Google. It showcases Google product where source code is being stored in application repository. When you make a push, it triggers cloud build jobs, which generates images that get stored in container, a container registry. You could do the same thing with another cloud, but definitely Google brings you all the components to be able to build that tool chain, right? One interesting point is that now that your application is fully declarative, you can declare how this application should look like in production through your manifests, right? That's what we call deployment manifest. Those can also be stored in version control system. And then when a successful build happens, you can then apply those manifests in your Kubernetes cluster, right? And we do exactly the same thing at TriggerMesh. We have this pipeline, which is fairly straightforward. We build images, goes to the registry. It makes a pull request to a config repository, I want to say, and then this config is then applied on the cluster. And we do this continuously, right? So that's very exciting. That's the modern application. But now what we're seeing is that more and more components of those applications are serverless, meaning in most cases, what people say when they mean serverless, it means scale to zero. It means that if this service is not being used, there is going to be no containers running. We scale to zero. We keep the definition. The service is still defined, declared, but there are no pods running. So you save a lot of resources. This is very, very nice when you're a big enterprise that maybe has like what I call the 1,000 Java application problem. You may have to keep Java applications running forever, and then you realize that you have a total sprawl of apps that are not updated, that you maybe use once a year, things like this, but you have to keep them running. Imagine if you had scale to zero, then suddenly you would have potentially huge consolidation in your setup, and they would only be awakened when they're used, right? So that's what usually people mean when they say serverless. It's scale to zero. But where it gets extremely interesting, and we get to the next step in the application modernization, the next step in your digital transformation to accelerate your time to market, is when that entire application becomes event-driven. Right? When every bit is much more loosely coupled, much more autonomous, and then everything reacts on events, right? What that gives you is that you can develop every bit separately, independently. You can deploy them independently, and then it's just events that happen, and you just have to declare, what happens when an event of a particular type is emitted, right? So event-driven system or messaging system have been used for a while, but not in the context of a very modern application where you have services that can scale to zero, where you have maybe cloud APIs that are being used in the mix and so on, right? So when you look at it in that context, what you're actually building is a service-full application. It's an app that's event-driven, that has components that scale to zero, and that have components that are multi-cloud, on-premises, external cloud. That's what we mean by going service full. And I bet you that you have this pattern in your enterprise.